Thank you, Jane, for your great experience talk. Are there any questions? Yes.
Why do you think the Diamond Sutra master went to look for a teacher elsewhere instead of staying with the lunch lady that he was awakened by?
So because Jane said how old women are wise, actually in ancient China, old women, and in modern day, when you become an old woman, you discover this, old women are considered sort of like, meh, it's just an old woman, you know? Old men too, but old women worse. So, so the standard trope, and you actually see this in sermons that are sometimes given, or speeches that are sometimes given, where there's some woman who has achieved some kind of honor within the sangha, and the master will exhort the monks, if even a woman can do it, why don't you? So it's like this, if even this old woman can do it, in the version that I've of the story, some versions of this story that I've heard, what he says to her is, who's your teacher? So he's not going to learn from an old woman. He's above that. He's better than that. He's going to go to the guy, right?
Sexism.
Exactly, exactly. And the other thing is, in these stories, you know, she's not given a name. In most of these stories where there's an old woman, or a young woman, or any woman, there are very few of them where the women are given names. There's one where this nun who comes up to Master Guji and says to him, you know, he's again studying the sutras. He's a great sutra master. He has hundreds and hundreds of students, and he's studying the sutras, and suddenly he realizes that there's a shadow over his page, and he looks up, and this very tall nun, whose name I'm suddenly forgetting, but it means true world, like reality, true world. And so she's given a name, and she says to him, you know, give me one word. You know, she doesn't ask a question, like you just asked a question, and then, you know, you can figure it out. She says, give me one word, which is much harder to respond to, right? And he just goes, you know. And then, well, first she circles around 3 times, hitting her staff, her, you know, and then she says, give me one word, and he can't speak. And then she turns to walk off, and, you know, it's like tigers and stuff. It's near nighttime, and the mountains were dangerous. And he says, well, why don't you stay the night? And she says, give me one word, and I'll stay the night. And he can't do it, so she leaves. So she has a name. And again, you know, he sits there, he throws away his sutras, he sends away his students. He doesn't follow her and say, teach me. He doesn't do that. He sits there, and then his Zen master shows up. She must have told this other guy, oh, you know, I just hit Guji really hard, and he's really having a hard time. Why don't you go straighten him out? And so the master comes, and they sit together for 2 days, and then Guji, you know, awakens, which I thought was kind of poor. He should have had to practice for many years. You know, instead, just like that. And it's the same thing when Doksan goes to see this teacher. He awakens very quickly. And again, you know, really? You know, it doesn't seem fair. But maybe that's the sutra people getting back at the Zen people. See, if you study sutras really, really hard, then all you need is, you know, like just 5 minutes and you wake up. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of politics in all these stories. But yeah. So, yeah, it's sexism pure and simple. Yeah, there were many women, not many, but more than a couple of handfuls of women. Well, actually, probably about I don't know, some depending on the version of the lineage charts, there'd be between 12 and 16 women who appear. And those numbers are approximate, I'm not sure exactly, in the lineage charts of the Tang and Song dynasty. But they're not given a lot of prominence. Their names have largely been forgotten unless you actually look at the lineage charts, unless somebody tells you, oh yeah, that person is female, that person is a woman. Otherwise you wouldn't know it. And the nuns' temples kept records. So you have the record of Linchi, you have the record of Unmun, Yunmun, you have these records of the great Zen masters that their students wrote down. Well, the nuns' temples, they did the same thing, but those records didn't get disseminated. So you didn't have people disseminating the teachings of Miao Tsung, for example, or the teachings of, that great, I don't know, this great woman who is a contemporary of Linchi, and considered as equal. You just don't have those things circulating. You might have a couple of stories. And then in the 1990s, a whole bunch of scholars, I think they were all women, started looking into this. And so now much more of this information is available to us. And there are books on it, you know. But yeah, it's largely been obscured in the memory. But, you know, so the guys are jerks. So what? We can still practice. You know, we have to believe in ourselves, and we have to believe in each other. All of us have to believe in each other, and each of us has to believe in ourselves. And even if some idiot, I'll get to you, even if some idiot doesn't recognize who you are, that means he's an idiot. You recognize it, you practice, you know? Don't let the bastards get you down. That's really important. There's a very strong, strong women's tradition in Zen. And the reason that there is such a tradition is these women would not let the bastards get them down. Even if formally they had to sit behind the monks, they still practiced hard. And in Korea, nuns have a reputation of much harder practice than monks. People will give nuns a certain kind of respect that monks don't necessarily get, because they recognize that these nuns, they don't get anything from their practice. The monks can get, you know, sort of honors and stuff like that. The nuns don't get that stuff, so they're really highly respected, exactly because of that. So yeah, don't ever let the bastards get you down, okay? And don't ever be a bastard either, okay? All right. Thank you, you have a question. So let's pass you the microphone.
Is there a tradition of visualization within Kwando?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. So visualization is a technique that's used very widely in Tibetan Buddhism. I don't know about if it's used in Theravada. I do know that it's not particularly used in Zen. So Zen really, any form of Zen, no matter what the outer trappings are, this great question and great doubt is very important. So it's not a practice of visualization, which is...
Something called the Zen butter pat meditation. Like sort of,
I've never heard of that. Could you say that again?
I use this meditation app called, I use a meditation app called Insight Timer, and that's a Zen butter pat meditation.
I have.
You visualize butter.
Oh, a butter pat on the top of your head? That has an interesting history. At first, it's not actually from Zen. What it comes from, it's the place where I know it from is Hakuin, who was this great, I believe, 17th century Japanese master. And he's the guy who really reformed Rinzai and made it fantastic. Really strengthened it and pulled it together. But when he was young, he had a terrible crisis. And it is similar to the kind of crisis that Doksan had or Guji had, and this was like 1,000 years, 900 years later after those guys, but his was self-imposed. He had heard, and one of my favorites, so Jane referred to Doksan carrying his bowls, and one of the characters in that Kangan is his main student, Amdu, who is the head monk. And Amdu later became a great Zen master. And this is the end of the Tang dynasty. This is when you have this horrible wars and famines and robbers and terrible things are going on, invasions from the south, from the north, all over. It's really a terrible, terrible time. Famine, you name it, they had it. They even had locusts. And so in this terrible time, the reason that the monasteries were in high mountains was not for the view, it was because it was safer. You could see who's coming, and you could go hide. So the monks in Amdu's monastery, they see that, you know, some kind of robbers or warlords or somebody's coming up, you know, and so they all go and hide, and Amdu says, I'm sick of this. I'm going to sit here. And he sits, you know, in front of the Buddha, like I'm sitting in front of the Buddha, but his Buddha was probably bigger. And he's sitting in front of the Buddha, and this guy comes in, and, you know, the warlord or bandit or whatever he was, and he says, you know, I can kill you. And, you know, Amdu does the thing where you just sit there and you don't do anything, you know. And the guy kills Amdu. And usually in these stories, you know, the Zen master dies completely unperturbed. Or as the guy goes to kill him, he says, oh, I realize my mistake. Please, may I shave my head? You know, neither of those happens. What happens is this guy skewers Amdu, and Amdu screams. And this scream can be heard for 20 li. And 20 li, China, equals 6 miles. So imagine, you hear someone scream from 6 miles away. That's quite a scream, you know? So this story, you know, goes down. It's in the records, and everyone hears it, and Hakuin hears it as a young Zen monk. And he gets really, really perturbed, because he says to himself, what is the point of practicing if when I die, I will suffer? You had this idea that, you know, practice was about removing his own personal suffering, and then he will never suffer again. You know, he had that idea. And a lot of people have that idea. So he, it's a very attractive idea. So he has this question, and he brings it all over Japan. He asks all the masters, you know, what is going on here? And, you know, they don't have a satisfactory answer, and he sort of has like a nervous breakdown. And so finally he finds some kind of Taoist, I guess, master who says, oh, you have to do this meditation where you imagine a pat of butter on your head, and it's melting and it's going through your mind. And I don't think they had the word nervous system, but basically it's going through your mind and your body. And, you know, that's where I know of that meditation. But it's not a standard Zen meditation at all. It comes from somewhere else. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I got to tell the story of Amdu, which is one of my very favorite stories. And Hakuin too. That's, yeah, right. 2 of my favorite stories in one. Thank you. Oh, let's see. Oh, someone says, okay, this is Sean. You say we have to believe in ourselves. What does it mean to believe in yourself if there is no self? If there is no self, what are we to believe in? Good question. So that kind of, I gotta adjust this. I don't want to adjust, okay. That kind of question is what we call a great question. So that kind of question is a question that you don't answer it in a way that you can say, oh, I'm done with it, you know. So what is this self? What is this thing we call self? And what is that we believe in? So my teacher always, he made the distinction, he's not the first to do this, between small self and big self. So the small self is what we usually think of as self. So we think of believing in ourself as believing, oh, I'm a really cool person, you know. I'm really beautiful, or I'm really smart, or I'm really nice, or, you know, whatever we want to think of ourselves. I'm this wonderful person. That's what we think of believing in ourselves. We also think of believing in ourselves. The small self is, I deserve everything I want, right? I think we can think of a lot of people who go around, I deserve this, I deserve this, I deserve this. How dare you not give me this? How dare you not give me that? And a lot of them are in positions of power, aren't they? So that's the small self. But your true self isn't yours. Your true self is not limited to this body. It's not limited to this space and this time. Your true self is never born, and it never dies. And that is the self that you believe in. But that self, what is it? I mean, I can say that it's never born, never dies. I mean, yeah, I can say these words. What the hell do they mean? It's so weird, what I just said. It's really strange. It doesn't make sense. Because everything is born and everything dies. And I said, oh, you have this true self. It's never born and never dies. Also, everything is originally emptiness. And yet I talked about this true self. So what is going on here? So this is this great question. And you can't answer it with language. Because language, it's like you point. And these are pointing at the same thing, but you say, oh, this one's pointing, what is that? This one's pointing south, this one's pointing north, But they're pointing at the same thing. Well, trying to get them lined up there. They're pointing at the same thing, right? So I can say your true self is never born and never dies, and I can say everything is originally emptiness. Those are pointing at the same thing. So what is the behind meaning? As my good friend Daekwang Sanim, Zen Master Daekwang, likes to say, what is the behind meaning? What is going on here? Before speech, as Jane said, before speech, and I'll add before thinking, what is this? So this question, what is the true self? That's a wonderful question. You just observe. You just observe it. You don't try to catch it. Just observe. And it's before speech, before thinking. So we can't really talk about it, but we do anyway. Okay? So thank you for your question. And we are out of time. Oh, actually, it was somebody else's question. Okay, thank you. So we are out of time, so thank you.